favorite story, aka pick your favorite child, part 1. Because I know what's coming up after this. So I would say the one that really just kind of hit me the hardest while writing it was probably Children of the Neon Goddess. It's one of the weirdest, it's one of the most oddly personal, but not in like an autobiographical way, but more in just a emotionally resonant way. I kind of liked the idea of the surrogate father-son dynamic that it posed, that it created there. I'm also very fond of a certain set piece at the end of Caught in the Crosshairs that, I'll say this much. You can tell I'm a Hitchcock fan because the construction of that, whenever this winds up turning into an animated pilot TV series, feature film, that is like a set piece I would gladly realize in some form, because it is just such a fun, tense moment. I could also probably just do this going, story for story across each series. So the war, it probably would be Children of the Neon Goddess, just because of how much it meant to me at the time. And I also love what happened. A fan had actually come up to me and said, man, it's like PKD and Harlan Ellison writing The Terminator. I'm like, that is a wild ass, conglomeration there, friend, but I'll take it. For The Hunt, that honor would probably go to either Obscure Mentis Vitalis or Nero's Bastards, just because one is me finally exhuming sort of the inner issues of that trio, that quartet, well, technically, because Sabina isn't left out in sort of the dream journey element. And Nero's Bastards, because I so relished finally giving these characters something vaguely resembling stasis. Because they still have a lot to go through. They still haven't found the Colosseum. They're still figuring out what all this, what these Galati model things are. I don't even think they have the term for it at that point. But it was just so refreshing to kind of realign everyone, especially after all the madness of the past 2 years. Urban Avenger, that's easy. It's the professor's lesson. I love the dynamic. I love the old school, new school. I like how Smith becomes his own character as we go on, but I also like being able to just say, you know what, I'm bored. I'm going to put John Pertwee as the Doctor in my weird wolf sci-fi shtick. And it works. It works because of that culture clash, while also creating these two clearly identifiable personalities. That and also, but the key to Professor Smith is that by virtue of the world he's in, he's allowed to be a bit more violent, he's allowed to relish in some of the violence, and he's also allowed to play things a lot more cool, slick, not quite, I wouldn't quite say mod, although definitely the elements there, from the E-type jag to the kind of the dandyish outfit, all do fit pretty seamlessly into the 60s, into the 60s feng shui of the Urban Avenger series, to contrast the dope-smoking hippie punk that he's playing off of. Speed Freak Files, that's a hard one, because I actually really, every time I sit down to write them, I'm always just laughing hysterically by the end of each story. I would say probably On the Rocks is a fun one, just because of, again, the contrast between this, every hound type of guy, Buck Sterling, who's also, kind of this covert adventurer extraordinaire, going off against, all these, hardened, tough lawmen of the New West. And I also personally love one of the gags that happens later on, where Buck is kind of consoling a young pup. I won't give away the context. I'll just leave the scene in its vacuum. And every time Nick tries to tell it, he starts tearing up, and so he starts screaming, "Who's cutting onions in here?" I love. It's one of those things that's just. You look at it two ways. One, it's so stupid, but on the other hand, it's so in character, and I love it to bits. My favorite tale from the front line. I'm giving it to the day Knox died. I loved writing that 3-parter. I loved because it paints in colors I just cannot do in any of the other series. It's not only just dead series, it behaves in a different way to all the other stories. Because there's the cyberpunk elements, there's the classic dystopian elements, but the voice of it is just so different from everything else in the series. And it's such a fitting examination of how what led up to Knox defecting. And I'm also forever proud of the dirty deed that was done in part 2, which, spoiler alert, although if you've seen the character and you know it's a prequel story, it's no surprise. How he loses his arm, I love how that set piece came together. Again, one of those kind of Hitchcockian moments where you can kind of roil up the suspense, build it and build it and build it, and then bam, hit him with it. Just so much fun. Ah, yes, favorite character. Oh, good God, again. I'd say probably if we wanted to go by series, again, just to give everyone kind of a fair shake. It'd be silly if I didn't say Knox or Gibson, but I'm gonna be honest. I love writing for Grim Herrera. There's a reason why he led the sort of what I call like the Eastern Saga in 2024. He's just a badass motherfucker. I love this man so much. I love his getup. I love the way he carries himself in each story. He's just the bomb. He is just so much fun. The Hunt. Again, it'd be silly if I didn't say Valentina, and to be fair, Valentina's also been sort of this personal avatar for me, especially when I was really in the thick of dealing with a lot of my struggles with mental health, like nothing like clinical, but just, the usual pressures, anxieties, depression, all that fun stuff. But I am gonna have to give it to Marcus. He is such a bizarre. In his inception, he is this gentleman with a lot of these very peculiar interests, but also is probably the most affected by the conditioning, and it creates this incredibly sympathetic character who, once he's able to finally overcome the internal struggles, just matures into this absolute badass. And he's able to put those energies to good use. And he's one of those guys where you want to give him a hug. You just want to give him a hug and say, "It's gonna be okay, big guy." Like, he really is. And I just love writing for him. Urban Adventure, I have no problem saying Lita's probably my favorite character. Not just as a lead, but just as an all-rounder, because of her sort of this gradual transformation from this, lone wolf, pun violently intended, standing up against the corruption of Haven, to just being this absolute goofball, this absolute clown car crash of a character, without ever losing the base components of her, and without ever losing that, go-get-em attitude, and without losing the plot, per se. Like, she's meant to be anarchic, she's meant to be crazy, she's meant to kind of relish in the chaos she causes. But again, she knows what the score is. She knows what they're up against. And it's also the reason why I loved writing the more mature version of her. You see a bit of it in 10-Ton Runaway, our 100th story. You saw a bit of it in the Short Circuit Revolution, because that's her, that is her chance to to look at her basically in middle age. And you get to see how she still maintains the energy of classic Lita, while also still gaining a sense of responsibility that you do not sense in a good chunk of those early stories. It doesn't really hit her until Underground Hounds. Just kind of how really fucked the situation is. And it's not really until she has to deal with something that interpersonally freakish. Speed Freak Files, again, I give it to the lead, Nick, because, again, I like him as an all-rounder. I like that he can be serious, but he can also just be this absolute, he shoots the shit with anyone, who sits down with him willing to have a beer. And at the same time, he also, when he gets blind drunk, I think Drunk on Dust Devils is one of the funniest stories I've written, just because of the frame of Rory coming into the booth and being like, so we got a problem here. Your regularly scheduled host is drunk as a skunk, and I don't know how good he'll be at telling this one. And it was so silly, but again, so much fun to do. Favorite Alan Firedale episode. This, I'll be honest, the giveaway is that if it's a free episode, that's probably the one. And in the case of Alan Firedale, I loved doing Flames Along the Homelands and Devil's Gold. I think it was also just because of the amount of work that was put into both. In Flames Along the Homeland, I literally was learning how to pronounce, Navajo names, Navajo words, as, accurately as possible. I was learning, it phonetically, the, International Phonetic Alphabet Speaker System. I was learning from that. The music. While I wasn't able to, write as much for Devil's Gold as I wanted to, the music on Flames is just some of my most favorite I've ever written, period. I love the theme that we wrote, the overarching theme that gets, it's reprised in Devil's Gold, and it's also reprised, I believe, at the end of Cypress Fires. And it's just this beautiful, wistful, sort of inspired by the work of Miklos Rocha, Ben-Hur and Kilvadis and Spellbound, that very rich, lush, melodic, old Hollywood element, while also being played on this pack of synths, all sorts of crazy. Again, it also features probably one of my favorite uses of Moog synthesizer I've ever done is in episode 2. But even beyond the production elements, I just think the concepts are utterly wild and kind of best represent how far out there we're willing to go with Alan Firedale as this in-world fantasy radio show, while also being very good representations of the dynamics between Alan and Golden Cloud. Absolutely. As kind of this innocent, inquiring character in Golden Cloud versus, this tough, rockabilly sort of hero in Alan. As well as still fulfilling that stranger comes to town, solves people's problems, and leaves kind of format. And it was interesting to revisit the characters later, especially to give Joe more of a lead in Devil's Gold, which is actually one of my favorite vocal performances. Because what Brendan did is that he pitched the voice down just enough to deepen it without turning it into a cartoonish, like a total cartoon pitch shift thing. We've had to do that on some characters, and sometimes it works great. Dr. Maroon sounds fantastic. Going down, like, I think, like, a whole step is about as far as we're willing to go with deepening my voice digitally. But the carefulness with which he does Joe Hatal in Devil's Gold. And you hear, it's literally one of the first voices you hear in the show. That is one of my favorite performances as a voice artist. Just two incredibly fun, incredibly creative shows that really capture that golden age comic pulp madhouse ethos, really. Advice I would give to creators just starting out. This is like an amalgamation of both private conversations I've had, but also just kind of garden variety advice. And my personal advice would be this: consistent persistence is key. And I say that because this series would not have existed if I wasn't passionate about its creation from the outset. If I hadn't thrown my back into it, especially when I had nothing left to lose, which, you know, that's kind of also the other thing too. I'm like 23, I'm turning 24 in July as I'm recording this. I've got, you know, the whole life ahead of me thing going for me. But I really believed in making this series, and I went, you know, hit the ground running in 2021 on pre-production. And again, one of my favorite stories that I always tell people is one night at college, I'm bored, so I'm thinking, okay, I'll order Chinese food tonight. I'm not feeling like dining hall food tonight. And so, I ordered my usual, and it comes to the dorm, start eating it, you get down to the fortune cookie, and I will never forget the moment I just cracked this open, and I about burst out laughing. Now, for those who recall, I'd mentioned in the episode of the primer on Tales from the Frontline that the very first story was an address from the General, which explained Knox's relationship with his wife, Lorraine Angel Knox, and the fact that her Porsche 356 that she personally restored herself, she had mixed up the badge numbers. Well, they had been separated and she mixed them up, and so it was a Porsche 365 instead of a 356. To what should my wondering eye appear but a fortune that says there are 356 days in a year, may all 365 of your dreams come true. And that was the moment I was like, oh yeah, we're on the right track with working on this series. Having a good omen like that helps, but if you don't, again, you just have to, it is as chintzy as believe in yourself. One, if you don't, who will? But also, more importantly, because we are not at a very particularly healthy time for independent art and entertainment. Not because we're lacking in talent or compelling visions, but simply because we are going up against the attention economy. We are going up against an entire internet ecosystem that is handcrafted to siphon your attention away down rabbit holes, hot button topics, flame wars, random arguments, bad news galore. It's meant to keep you scrolling. It's meant to keep you sedated. It's meant to keep you not even complacent. It's meant to keep you too depressed to do anything about it. And that's kind of been the big thing I've faced with 365 Infantry. The key is that you literally just never give up. Just do not stop. Tell the story, tell it to the best of your ability, go at it from end to end. If you're able to complete this project, whether you're doing like, I'm going to write a novel in a month, or you're going to do what I've done and made a mini media empire for the hell of it, whatever it is you're planning, just stick with it, and see it through to the very end. Because at the end of the day, whether you come up on top or you fall away at some point, at least you'll learn from the experience. And more importantly, you'll be able to put that knowledge towards the next step. My dream with 365 is not only bringing it to its proper conclusion, of which I've had planned since the outset, but then taking it into other mediums, taking it into the world of animation, maybe video games, maybe doing more audio productions because I enjoy the medium so much, maybe even relishing in the pure musical side of things, because I've always wanted to, this is my guilty secret, I've always wanted to do a Roger Steele Trio album. Just an actual unironic jazz album credited to Mr. Steele and his fellow players. Whatever happens next in the future, at least I know I gave this my best shot. And I'm still going to keep taking shots too, because I spent too much time working on this, and I'm not just buying into sunk cost fallacy, I'm having too much fun writing these stories. So long as it's fun for me, I'll be here. Can't get rid of me. Sorry, I'm stuck here. I'm like the worst squatter imaginable. I am literally gluing my ass to the floor and finishing this series. You can't take me away!